Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. We have come to the end of the 2024 Formula One season. Oh, my goodness. I don't think any of us could have dreamed it would have been a season to remember as it has been. And we're joined by our Formula One correspondent who joined us before the season started, in the middle of the season, and now joins us to wrap it all up. Hendrik Verwoerd, thank you for your time and welcome once again to the program.
Always a pleasure, Louis. Great to be with you.
Can you believe what's gone on in 2024? It's been fantastic.
Well, it's been a fantastic second half of the season. As you said, we spoke at sort of more or less the midway point of the season earlier this year, and we thought this is another Red Bull Max Verstappen benefit season lying ahead. Who's going to finish second? And well, lo and behold, after the first 10 races that Max won 7 of them, everything turned around and we had an absolutely, as you say, fantastic second half of the season. Well, more than second half, but the last 14 races at least. So that was a classic one. That was one for the books, certainly.
There were a lot of criticism at the size of the calendar, the number of races there were going to be. Some of the old-fashioned critics were saying it's too long. But I think they got it right with the number of races, the excitement that there was, and the fact that the season has been drawn out 90-odd days and we start all over again.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, the fans' point of view, it was great, to have not to have to wait too long between races. I think there is a certain point where you maybe think, look, it's too much. You need to have a bit of an exclusivity around it. It's not like NASCAR. We have something like 38 races a year. We had actually 30 races this year, including, the 6 sprints as well. Yeah. But the 24 Grand Prix events. Yeah, I think that's about the maximum. And the poor people involved. If you think about the teams and the travel that's involved in this case, we had a number of 3, triple headers, one after another. At the end of the season, we had 6 races in 8 weeks. And the travel that they had to do spanning from Las Vegas to Abu Dhabi. And Qatar. So it's very, very hard on the team personnel. The drivers also, you've got the jet lag factor. These guys are going to race at 300 k's an hour. They've got to be on it, physically. Their bodies have to be adjusted to the time zones and stuff. It's very tough for the guys involved, but it is great, I think, for us as the spectators and the fans. The maximum allowed is 25 races, by the way, in the contracts. So it's possible that we could see a 25 race calendar, but certainly not in the near future. There is a provisional calendar for next year, and that's also 24 races. But I think that's probably about the maximum that we're going to have.
Okay, there's so many talking points. Let's just talk about the main ones, if we may. Let's start with the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen's won it again. He was pushed until 2 or 3 races from the end by Lando Norris. But I don't think, in my opinion, and I'll state this is my opinion, that he's done his popularity too much good by some of the comments that he's made and shown that he perhaps did crack a little bit under pressure.
Yeah, he did. I'm not sure that you and I discussed this, but I did say on some platform that Max has seemingly, and again, this is my opinion, and I'm not a qualified psychologist, but he seems to crack under pressure still. We saw that in 2021 when he battled against, when he battled against Lewis Hamilton. He cracked a number of times and did some very, very dubious things on track. In 2022 and 2023 was never really challenged. So, the situation never came up. For the first half of this year, he was never really challenged. And then things started to go wrong as far as he's concerned. And he did do a number of questionable moves again under pressure. We're thinking about the clash between him and Norris in the Austrian Grand Prix at the A1 at the Red Bull Ring. Think about the United States Grand Prix, that clash again between him and Lando Norris that triggered a discussion about what do the rules say about overtaking, attacking, and when can you push somebody wide and when can't you do that. So on a number of occasions, he certainly, and even, this last race, last Sunday, when he lunged on the inside of Oscar Piastri into the first corner, which was completely unnecessary, because he had already clinched the championship. He didn't really need to do that. but his instinct took over. And then he was very angry about getting a well-deserved penalty afterwards. So yeah, I think, one has to be careful not to be a Verstappen basher. I'm trying not to be, but there are certain situations where he was unjustified in his actions, and he's shown that one weakness, I think, in his makeup.
Yeah, a lot of the great champions moan. Nigel Mansell, definitely. Lewis Hamilton, definitely.
Yeah.
And one or two others. But moaning is one thing, but being rude and almost arrogant to the point of believing that you're an untouchable. And again, I'm not a Max Verstappen basher in terms of his ability to drive a racing car. Nobody can be. I mean, he's outstanding.
Yeah.
But we've had, as you and I have watched the sport for so many, many years, decades, are so excited by. My daughter is a Formula One fanatic, thanks to the Lando Norrises of the world and others that have brought these youngsters into the game. And let's be honest, the EA Sports and F1 PlayStation games. And then you get somebody swearing and screaming. It just doesn't gel for me that the man that's supposedly at the pinnacle of his game and the guy that's leading the sport into the next decade is behaving like that. And yet it feels as though nobody can really control him.
I think that's the point that George Russell tried to make over the last weekend.
Yeah.
In his spat between the two of them, saying that, nobody's willing to stand up against Max Verstappen, which is not quite true. I think Lewis Hamilton did in 2021. I think on a number of occasions, guys did try to stand up against him. But yeah, it is difficult to judge because, Louis, in all the years that you and I have been watching it, we never had access. We as spectators, had never had the access to the radio conversations that the drivers have that people have these days. The radio messages being broadcast by broadcasters. So. It's difficult to say it never happened and that now all of a sudden it's something new. I think, it's probably something that has always happened, but it's always been under the radar, so to speak. But again, we've got a much larger and wider and more differentiated audience at the moment, the fan base of Formula One, and social media plays a huge role in the effect that it has on people. And the examples that are being set. So, I think these guys have to be a little bit more careful about the way that they act because the effect of their actions is so much wider than it used to be. I mean, Formula One used to be a very, very niche sport many years ago. It's not anymore.
And then on the other side of the spectrum is the Papaya team with Lando Norris leading that team, Oscar Piastri, although he is relatively quiet, and Zach Brown and the others, that have been the complete opposite to Red Bull and Max Verstappen. They've brought the sport to the people. And Lando's got an opportunity next year, and he will, and the great thing about him is his honesty. And when he thinks he's done wrong, and he knows he's done wrong, he'll admit that he's done wrong, and he's learning, and that's fantastic. He's not making excuses based on other people's issues. He's making, not excuses, but admitting the mistakes that he's made. And at 360 kilometers an hour, of course you're going to make mistakes. But now, before you know it, you close your eyes and you open your eyes, and he's no longer that young kid that's got into Formula One. He's now got all that experience behind him and definitely has a car that can challenge Max and anybody else next year and become driver's champion.
Yeah, I just wish he could change his haircut. But that's beside the point. If you look at the results this year, the McLaren drivers are the only two drivers that scored points in every single race. And that, I think, says everything about the McLaren effort this season. And that led to them obviously, scoring as many points as was ever possible, on every occasion. And therefore they ended up as a Constructors' Championship. You cannot say the same specifically of Red Bull. They played with one hand behind their back. Sergio Perez didn't really contribute at all. And that's another question. Is he going to continue with them next year? I don't think so. I don't think anybody thinks so. But it was, for Red Bull, it was a one-man show. Ferrari, again, they made a number of mistakes and some things didn't go quite right for them, although they came back strongly towards the end of the season. But it was the papaya team, as you say, that did the best they can. I think there are still some questions. Yes, it is laudable, I think, for Lando to be honest and to criticize himself. He's very hard on himself. But I think, at the elite level of Formula One, that can be a bit of a weakness that his rivals can exploit in the future. I think Oscar Piastri is far more even-keeled, so to speak, emotionally. The Australian doesn't seem to be thrown by anything at all. I think personally, Oscar is going to be the stronger of the two next year. Oscar is only, he's not quite a rookie yet, but he's still very early in his career. Norris has got a few years on him in terms of experience. But Oscar has been very strong emotionally, mentally, let's say mentally.
Yeah.
Very strong this year as opposed to Lando. They are different people, of course. They are different personalities. They are different makeup. But I think, if you take the two of them in an equal car from the start of the season, I'm gonna put my money more on Oscar to win it this in the next season than Lando. I honestly think Oscar has got the mental edge on him.
Everybody made mistakes, but I guess the biggest mistake, if we look back, and has cost them the most, is Red Bull continuing on with a second driver who really was so far behind their main driver. I mean, you look at Ferrari, they made mistakes in pit stops. You look at McLaren, they made a couple of mistakes. But Red Bull, who are normally so brilliant at getting everything right, went through an entire season knowing they had a problem with their second driver and seemed to have, up until now, done very little about it.
Yeah, I think what they did, this is an opinion. I think what they did was they saw he had a strong start to the season. Then they saw his performances sort of taper off, and they thought, okay, let's give him a contract for next year, because maybe the uncertainty of not having a contract signed at that point yet would give him the stability and would aid him, to up his performance. Because that actually almost mirrors what happened the previous season. He had a strong start in 2023, then it tapered off, and then towards the end of the season, he came on stronger in 2023. And I think they hoped that would happen again. It did not happen. In fact, he won 4 of the first. He didn't win. He finished second on 4 occasions in the first 6 races. And then he didn't score any more points there. And I think maximum of 8 points at Zandvoort. That was his maximum for the rest of the season. After the Miami Grand Prix. So that plan, if it was, certainly didn't work out. I think the dilemma that they had was who do they replace? Do they replace him in the middle of the season, and with whom do they replace him? At that point, I think they were evaluating Ricciardo's performance at RB. And if he had a very strong season up to that point, I think Ricciardo could have been a realistic replacement for Perez at Red Bull, but that didn't happen. So then, what do? You've got very few options. Do you take Tsunoda over and leave Liam Lawson there, or do you put Liam Lawson in his seat in the middle of the season? And what guarantee? I think the question was, what guarantee would you have whoever you replace Sergio with at Red Bull? Would he be able to perform closer to Max than Sergio from the middle of the season, having parachuted him in? And I think their reasoning was, no, there's no guarantee. So why upset the apple cart? Because, that apple cart comes with a lot of Mexican sponsorship, a lot of money coming from that as well. So I think they were in a bit of a dilemma. Yes, they were fighting with one hand tied behind their backs, but I don't think they had much of an alternative. What I do think is going to happen, we are probably going to hear it this week, is that Perez is not going to, because there must be performance clauses like in every other contract, and if you don't meet those expectations, then you are out. And that is the same for anybody in Formula One. I think we're going to hear this week already, that they're going to replace him with, and I'm going to put my money on Liam Lawson.
Right, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, if we may, because arguably, not just in Formula One, which is in fact not arguably in Formula One, because it is the best partnership ever, but most probably the most successful partnership in any form of sport anywhere in the world, the Mercedes partnership with Lewis Hamilton and the team. It's now over. He moves to Ferrari. He's won a race. He's still proven this weekend, albeit we didn't really see the overtake of George Russell, whether he was led through or he wasn't led through to finish fourth at the weekend, which was quite amazing. He can still drive. He's going to be 40 when he straps himself into that Ferrari next season for the first race. Your thoughts, first of all, on Hamilton and on his move to Ferrari?
I think he's had a very frustrating season this year for himself because, he certainly wasn't able to get the best out of that car. Neither did George Russell, although his teammate did better, obviously, than him, to get more out of it. Hamilton wants a very predictable car, and he didn't get that. Just on a little bit of a side note, regarding Lewis's last race, last weekend in Abu Dhabi, it was so similar to a race that I attended in 2006 in Sao Paulo, when it was Michael Schumacher's last race for Ferrari. Before he retired for a couple of years and then came back, obviously, but, he also, had to say goodbye to the team that he was so successful with, Schumacher, that time. And it was also expected of him to come to end his association with them on a high. But then things went wrong in the race. He had a puncture, if I recall, and he had to drop back to the back of the race, of the field. And then he made his way up to fourth position, right from the back of the field. It was one of Michael Schumacher's best ever drives that I think many people do not remember or do not take note of. I was there. I remember watching him closing and going past people at a rate of knots that you couldn't believe. It was absolutely fantastic. And I think Hamilton had a similar kind of farewell race because of bad luck in qualifying. That bollard that got stuck with him cost him a possible front row or even, top 5 qualifying position. And from there, he could certainly conceivably have fought for at least a podium, if not a victory. But that didn't happen, and he had to start 16th, and he fought his way back. A fantastic drive up to fourth again to finish fourth. Yeah. And the television director missed two key moments at the end of that race, and it was so frustrating. He missed that overtake. I've actually seen a spectator's video of that. That was a legitimate overtake around the outside of turn 9. George did not just open the door for him. George pushed him towards the outside of the corner. It's a fast corner, and Hamilton stayed on the outside of the corner, and of course he had much better tires, much better traction, so he could make it. And that was legitimate. It wasn't George that was simply just gifting him that position. And the other moment that the TV director missed was when Lando won the race.
Yeah.
We saw the shot. I think it was from the back, a long shot from the back where he crossed the line. He missed that moment when McLaren clinched the Constructors' Championship by Lando winning the race. So 2 mistakes by the TV director at the end. Yeah. But just to finish the Lewis Hamilton thing, I think he's going to be rejuvenated next year. It's a new challenge for him. He may be, obviously towards the end of his career, but he's still capable of those kind of drives. He has won 2 races in this season. And as you say, it's a remarkable relationship and partnership. 84 victories, 6 championships, in 246 races in the 12 years that they were together. So it was just absolutely amazing. I cannot think, and I think Martin Brundle also made the point during the race, that there's any other team partnership that is more successful in any sport.
And I just feel so sorry for Carlos Sainz. I mean, he's the better Ferrari driver as the season's gone along, and he's done absolutely nothing wrong, and the guy loses his seat to a 40-year-old. Not fair, really, is it?
Well, of course. And life is not fair, and Formula One is often not fair. But, would Fred Vasseur, who knows Lewis Hamilton from his junior categories, they raced together in Formula 3 and Formula 2 and whatever, would he have said no to Lewis Hamilton becoming available? I don't think he would have. And unfortunately, Carlos Sainz, well, he, as far as the points are concerned, he was second to Charles Leclerc at the Ferrari team this year. And if anybody would would leave, it would have been him. So unfortunately for him, but he's rejuvenated. He said after the race that while he was driving, in his last race for Ferrari, he was telling himself, remember how this feels. Remember how the car performs, how the car handles, because this is what I want my Williams to do when I go to Williams. So he was already looking forward to his new challenge. And, I think if there's anything that can be satisfactory for a driver, it is to lead a team from nowhere to become front runners, like Michael Schumacher has done. In fact, like Lewis Hamilton has done as well.
Yes.
So that is a challenge, and I think maybe the second prize to not be in a competitive car then the next year, then rather be in an uncompetitive car next year and try to lead the team over the next 3 or 4 years. He's got the time, he's young enough for that, to lead the team for the next 3 or 4 years to become a running team. That will be very, very satisfying if he can do that.
Yeah, but you spoke about Michael Schumacher, and I remember that race so well as you do. And then the comparison with Schumacher, with Hamilton, and with Sainz. I think we need to also remember that it didn't really matter if they crashed the car. They weren't driving for that racing team next season anyway. So there were opportunities to take gaps, which they might not necessarily have done if there was a race next weekend or in 2 weekends' time.
Sure.
Now, the last, but not least, and there are a few changes and a couple of people moving along. We think of Valtteri Bottas maybe not having a drive next year, but the big story of the year undoubtedly was Adrian Newey's move to leave Red Bull, and then subsequent announcement that he's off to Aston Martin along with sporting director Jonathan Wheatley, who goes to Sauber Haas. Now, that of course has massive implications, first of all for Red Bull, and then hopefully for the likes of Aston Martin and Sauber. A huge fillip for 2025 and most probably more for 2026 in Adrian Newey's case.
Yeah, absolutely. Next year's cars are pretty much done already, I think. Adrian might have had a little bit of a say for next year's Aston Martin, which is likely going to be called, let me see, the AMR 25. But certainly, I think, the whole strategy from Lawrence Stroll, the owner of the team, Lance's dad, was to get Newey there for the 2026 season. Many teams are going to be looking at 2026 next year, many teams are going to look more at 2026 than their performance in 2025, depending on how the competition rolls out. But 2026 is the next big change. The technical dispensation is going to be completely different from 2026 onwards. And most teams are going to start working on their 2026 cars from the 1st of January next year. That's when they are allowed to start working on the aerodynamics of their new car. And that is where Adrian Newey is going to come in and have a huge, hopefully for them, a huge effect on the design of the 2026 Aston Martin car. And that, of course, would be an Aston Martin Honda.
Yeah, while we're talking about 2026, I mean, when somebody says to me Cadillac, I think, this long stretch limo that picked me up at the airport in New York. I can imagine the first race when Cadillac get involved in 2026 and they push somebody off the track. The commentator's first thing is going to be driving a limousine around a Formula One track. I mean, it's just absolutely, the headlines have been written already. Good or bad for the sport?
Oh, it's brilliant for the sport. We remember days when there were 13 teams on the grid and 26 cars. In fact, we remember days when there were more than 40 cars that had to pre-qualify first. Absolutely brilliant news. Finally, they've been able to pull this one through, and it's largely, I think, thanks to Michael Andretti stepping back, and the whole ownership structure of, let's call it the Andretti Cadillac effort of earlier has now changed. New people are in charge, and it's now an official Cadillac Works entry. It's not, although for the first couple of years they're going to have to run customer engines. But the whole thing has changed. The emphasis has changed from a private entry to a full Works entry in 2026. And that's great for the sport. The president of the FIA, Mohammed bin Sulayem, has said, yes, it is great for the sport, but there's space for another team. And he'd like to see at least 12 teams. And I agree with him on that. We need another, and I think there are one or two very good proposed teams that didn't make it this time around, that may still hang around in the background and may see an opportunity in the near future to try and get a place on the grid as well.
It's been a long time since we have gone into or going into a new season where we can honestly say any one of 4 teams can come out at the top in the constructors, and certainly any one of most probably 6 drivers that we know of at the moment could become Formula One world champion come next year.
Yes. And that is the exciting part of it, because we are now, next year is going to be the final year of the current technical dispensation. Every team has got very close to the ceiling of their maximum performance, and we've seen that. We've seen how close it is towards the end of the season. It's going to be even more close for the entire season next year. And as you say, any driver out of the top 4 teams, depending on who's going to be next to Max Verstappen at Red Bull, is a possible race winner and a possible champion. Can Kimi Antonelli do it at Mercedes next year? In his first year. That is what Lewis Hamilton almost did in his very first year at McLaren in 2007. So it's possible for a rookie to actually win it if the car is competitive. And there's no reason to think that any of the top 4 cars is not going to be competitive. I do think that McLaren is going to have to start as the favorites, because they will carry on the momentum that they have at the moment. And they seem to be the one team that when they do bring upgrades to the car, they only bring an upgrade that they know will work. The other teams tend to bring an upgrade and try and see if it's going to work on the track, and sometimes it doesn't. Like Ferrari, they went down some rabbit hole in their upgrades this year before they got it right. And the same with Mercedes. Sometimes their upgrades work and sometimes it doesn't. Red Bull, obviously, I think has got the most complete car apart from McLaren. So let's put our money on the table. Let's say the favorites for next year has got to be Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris at McLaren. Followed by Max Verstappen and whoever partners him as the next favorites, and then after that could be probably Ferrari and then Mercedes. But in any order, having already said that McLaren is probably going to be it.
And lastly, but not least, I guess it is true that we hear that Max's girlfriend is expecting their first child. Does that change a driver's mindset going into a new season, knowing, first of all, that he's going to be a father, and secondly, you might take less chances? I don't know. Does it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, these guys, many of them are fathers, and we don't often, focus on whenever somebody becomes a father. And let's not forget that Max's girlfriend already has a daughter from a previous relationship. So, he's used to being or playing a father's role. I don't think, this being his own child is going to be that much different. These guys are wired to be competitive. This is what they do. And I don't think, and Max specifically, I think, is not going to soften just because he's now going to become a father. I don't think so. These guys, obviously they mature a little bit more as people being fathers. You will know, I think, in your case that I would assume that once you became a father, you matured a little bit more. But, this is what they do. This is their profession. This is what they this is what they've been wanting to do ever since they could open their eyes in many cases. So, no, I don't think it's going to change them at all.
Hendrik, it's been a fantastic 2024. We look forward to a brilliant 2025. Last question. The $64 million question. Any chance that pigs will fly and we'll get a Formula One Grand Prix in the near future?
The short answer is no.
That's how we end.
The long answer is we've got to have a separate conversation about this.
And that's where we'll end our chat with Hendrik Verwoerd, our Formula One motor racing correspondent for 2024 and leading into 2025. He will have The same overall on. He ain't moving teams. He will be with us next year, God willing, and we'll bring you 2025 Formula One news, previewing the season, and then, as usual, catching up with him. It's been a great pleasure. Have a very happy festive season, Hendrik, and we'll talk to you next year.
Thank you, guys. Same to you.
That's tonight's edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. We'll rev our way out of here, maybe under a yellow flag until tomorrow. Be nice to each other. Bye for now.